This week, Rick Farina and Rick Mellendick, board members at RF Hackers Sanctuary, are here to talk about RF Village at DefCon. Then we welcome Scott Schefferman and Yuri Bulligan, did I say that right? To discuss how the stakes are raised when protecting the foundation of computing. In the security news, pwned Piper and vulnerabilities that suck, assless chaps, how non-techie people use ARP, how to and how not to explain the history of crypto. They are still calling about your car's warranty. Master faces, things that will always be true with IoT vulnerabilities, DNS loopholes, and a toilet that turns human feces into cryptocurrency. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Can you pinpoint the 10 security gaps in your attack surface that account for 90% of your risk? It's impossible using a combination of scanners, pen tests, breach and attack simulation tools, and manual processes. But attackers can find your gaps. They perform recon and target the weaknesses with the best return. The Psycognito platform sees your external attack surface the way attackers do, eliminating blind spots. Powered by a global bot network, the Psycognito platform prioritizes your highest risk security gaps, integrates with existing workflows, and reduces operational costs. Visit securityweekly.com/Psycognito.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to our host, a man who up until tonight had no idea what a shitcoin was, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 705, recorded on August 5th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left is the illustrious Mr. Larry Bechet. Nice to have you here.
Yeah. I missed last week, didn't I?
You did.
Something?
No, I don't.
I was here last week.
We're old.
Who am I?
Every week is a new week.
Who are you? Get off my lawn. There are too
many
many states nowadays.
That's it. A special guest here in the studio, now part of the CRA family, Mr. Bill Brenner, is here with us. Bill, welcome in studio.
Good evening, and thank you.
It's nice to have you here, man.
Yeah, the last time I was on the show was before video.
That's right.
Whoa.
It was audio only.
Only.
Bill's actually famous.
2008.
Quoting a Shmoocon podcaster meetup and comparing it to Klingons at the dinner table.
The head table at a Klingon wedding.
Head table at the Klingon wedding. Yes, that was the exact reference.
And he was not wrong.
No, yeah. And we've, improved. No, never mind. We're still the same. On the lines remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson's here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Man, that was a while ago. I think I was even listening way back then. That's pretty awesome to have him on the show.
How things come full circle.
Wish I was there.
Now I get to harass Bill at my day job.
Nice.
And he does.
But it goes both ways. Bill harasses me at the day job.
Indeed
too.
it does.
Yes. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us.
Good to be here. We're enjoying that we can now do it without the tin cup and the 2 cups and the string,
Yes. There was some cups and string. There was phone lines involved in the early days, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
SC Media debuts its all-new SC Digital Experience, fully integrated with the Security Weekly podcast content and more. The new site increases the scope and scale of the original content from editorial staff, contributors, and far-reaching Cyber Risk Alliance network. You can visit scmagazine.com, check out our new look. Rick Farina and Rick Mellendick are both board members for RF Hackers Sanctuary. The RF Hackers Sanctuary is a group of experts in the areas of information, Wi-Fi, and radio frequency security with the common purpose to teach the exploration of these technologies with a focus on security. It sounds really formal and very serious, and I can assure you this will not be. Today they join us to discuss the RF Village at DefCon. Welcome, Rick and Rick.
Howdy, Paul.
How's it going?
How's it going, guys?
It's going good.
And nothing like having 2 guests that are both named Rick. This won't get confusing at all.
Right? Not at all.
No, it won't, Bob.
One of you is going to have to be Morty.
That's it. But Rick, your handle is Zero Chaos, right? Is that your I just outed you. Sorry.
You
It's okay. It cuts down on confusion. When somebody yells Rick in the wireless village, I tend to not look.
Yeah.
It's
But if they
just
yell your handle.
easier.
Zero. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Rick's the only one that calls me Rick.
Zero
Yeah.
Chaos. How did you get your start in information security? I don't know that I know the history behind it.
Oh, boy. Gosh. Started information security. Let's see. I went to high school, and I was really bored, and I took over the computer network, kind of by accident.
That sounds like you. That's very believable.
then
story,
they-
actually.
Then they decided they didn't want me going to that school anymore, and they sent me to the university, and I did the same thing. And
Also believable.
Yep.
yeah, I really like Layer 2. Anything on Layer 2 is super fun for me. And then I also liked like radio scanners and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I ended up in wireless technologies in general, just that beautiful Layer 1, Layer 2, and it just kind of magically is all around you and you wonder what's going on. Just really keeps my interest.
So not so much on the phone freaking side of things, more on the wireless and computer when you came up on the scene, right?
Much more so. My red box kind of melted in my hands because I wasn't any good at soldering.
Yeah. I suck
So-
at soldering too.
Yeah, my phone freaking career was very short.
Nice. Rick M., how'd you get your start in information security?
Oh, wow. So in college, got a bunch of had a bunch of weird years. Played baseball, got hurt, and decided that computers seemed like fun, and I didn't have to throw them anywhere. And then I realized how much I wanted to throw computers. First internship gave me a computer. I think the tower was 3.5 feet tall. Carried it back and forth in my back of my RX-7 and helped one of the hospitals up in Philly to put in their first WAN. Thought computers were really cool. And then around DefCon 10 or so, from afar watched the wireless war drive, and from that point wanted to run it. So Romer eventually gave me permission after Shipley's talk, and bunch of guys, John Kelly and Thorne, sort of handed over the reins after I watched Renderman win after he could have won 3 hours sooner because he wouldn't listen to me. And we've been playing.
I think
with
it's
this stuff
because
ever
his
since.
arms are really long, so his Wi-Fi antennas can go so much higher
Yeah.
than everyone else's.
But I will tell you, watching him run down the hallway at the Riv was one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Just him running, or just because of the?
Him running with one of those works that's over your shoulder under his arm that had the password written on the bottom, but he wanted to log into it so that he could figure out the password.
you know, and I think I was probably running right behind Render.
Is that
'cause I
the
was on
time
the team.
was that the same
That was
scene
the-
that you kicked your phone?
That was the same scene in which my BlackBerry on my belt fell out of the holder, and I
remember that,
I drop
actually.
kicked it across the hallway,
and it was totally fine. I mean,
well, it was the phone worked totally fine, except for the cellular radio didn't work.
Whoops.
Yep.
Oops.
Yeah. Other than that, it was fine.
That was the same year that they put the moratorium on radios in the casinos because,
Reasons.
people were in the casinos with radios.
Yep. Because of reasons, right?
Reasons.
So what is the RF Hackers Sanctuary?
So it started off, so back in the days of the Riv, the villages were kind of kicked off by DefCon. The wireless village was right at the top of the steps. Lockpick village was right next to it. And we were the first two villages. And it was just a really cool concept. Kahuna, Thorne, Mike Shear, myself, Renderman, all kind of just put this thing together. Converge was out there as well. I know, Larry, you popped in at one time.
Absolutely.
I got this wild idea that I'd get Romer, Al Potter, Bruce Potter, and Renderman in a talk on a panel together, which was one of the funniest panels ever because everybody just talked over each other for an hour. And everybody was right. So that sort of started off the idea of talks. And on top of talks, we had the Capture the Flag started up that year with a couple little games. And we were like, well, you know what? This is kind of cool. A lot of people seem to like it. And we've been filling rooms ever since. But we started off the Wi-Fi village. Then we realized that we were doing a lot more than Wi-Fi with Bluetooth. We were doing some signaling at that point. Zero brought in a bunch of radios as a ham. And we became the wireless village. And then we realized that really wasn't enough. Became the RF village. And this year, DefCon finally called us the RF village, which we're pretty psyched about. So RF Hacker Sanctuary was the nonprofit that we built to basically run the contest so that we had a little bit of protection between us and the contestants and the conferences and everything else. And at prime pre-COVID, I think we were doing 7 conferences a year. I'll let Zero talk about his amazing innovations that he's brought in, but we're now able to do 20 a year if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Zero, tell us about your amazing innovations now. Now I'm on the edge of my seat.
And this is to my question. You're like, nowadays and COVID, RF Village is up and running at DefCon right now. And how the hell do you do a CTF remote like that?
Your antenna is not big enough, Larry. I think that's the problem.
I know.
That was
I know.
Perfect response.
Yeah, between Zero, between you and I, we have make a full man, right?
You know it.
Hey, I heard that joke once.
I know. I heard. What credit where credit's due. Rick gave me that joke. I won't say which one.
There was a topic, right? And the topic was, how did we get here, right? So for a lot of years, we built the CTF and we tried to maintain it, and we tried to make it new and exciting and add things to it every year. And we said to ourselves, this is really cool for the people that are here. We'd roll in 6 or 8 Pelican cases, and they're just full of radios, and we pop them open and plug them in, and it was great, except for the rooms were full, and there were people playing in the hallways, and the goons were clearing the hallways, and there was never enough room. And this is mostly Rick's brainchild. I just kind of help him build stuff. And he said, it'd be really cool if we built a home game. I'm like, you're an idiot. There's no way we can do that. And then I went back to thinking about it. Like, this is a great idea. We should do that. And it went like that for about 3-4 years, I think. And it was just one of those things, because we were spending so much time innovating at the in-person conferences, we never had time to do it, right? We don't have a very big development team. It's me and some volunteers who help maintain some of the additional challenges. And then they canceled everything. We were given the same amount of notice last year as the general public. I think we were given 1 whole hour longer that DefCon was going to be completely virtual. And so I basically called up Rick. I'm like, hey, how you've been talking about the home game? I've been noodling it. Let's try to build this. And we pulled in one of our friends, Redbeard, who has a lot more cloud experience than I do for a lot of solid reasons. And he helped me to build my idea. And now that idea is running, I think, 50 players right now simultaneously in AWS. Each player gets their own kind of magic fake virtual environment. And as far as they can tell, they're like SSH'd into my basement full of wireless gear, but it's all pretend.
So that would imply you can virtualize Wi-Fi adapters and access points.
Yes, you can.
Tell us more about that. That's intriguing.
It's pretty crazy, actually. The Linux developers for the driver stack, Mac 802.11, built a fake driver to test to make sure that the drivers are right. Mm-hmm. And what this fake driver does, it does more than just, your regular harness testing stuff. It actually implements all of the features necessary, including a complete virtual airspace. You can put things on different channels. They will act like they are in different channels. You can separate them. You can cause packet loss. You can do everything you can in the real world from behind the scenes to make a realistic Wi-Fi environment if you want to.
Right, because whether the bits are in the air or generated within the driver doesn't matter to the computer. The computer doesn't know if the bits are in the air or whether they're being generated by a computer locally in the driver. Yeah,
exactly. Conceptually, it's like running a pigtail from a signal generator right into a software-defined radio or an oscillator.
Right.
It's conceptually the exact same thing. One thing Rick forgot to mention, then I'm going to hand it back to him because he is the genius behind this, is not only could we SSH in last year and run AeroDump and Airmon and all the basic command line tools, but now from an iPad, you can actually run a full version of Black Arch, Kali, Pen 2, and Parrot, right? Yep. I'm running Kismet right now in the Capture the Flag, capturing packets with 73 devices showing up in it. And it's just right out of a web browser. So it's absolutely mind-blowing, breaking physics all the way around.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time optimizing this and trying to make it clean. We have a full SSH environment that we've had for the last year. But over that year, we've actually gotten a full VNC environment. So you can literally just open this up in your web browser on your tablet, and you can get like you're plugged into a Linux computer somewhere else. So you've got the whole game right there available to you. You've got all the software-defined radio tools pre-installed, and you can connect to basically, we also have a bunch of software-defined radio tools. You can't virtualize those radios in the same way you can the Wi-Fi ones. So the way we do it now is we actually use a ZMQ socket, and we send raw IQ data, which is what the SDRs receive, over that socket. So you essentially tune by picking a port, and as you connect to that port, it sends you a bunch of data. The ones that have our stuff on them have a spectrum paint of the RFHS logo, and then it has some repeating signal that you're supposed to decode.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's really cool.
Now Zero, and I'm saying Zero to keep this straight between the Ricks. On the ZMQ, I remember seeing, what was it, last year, that you needed to, set up some GNU radio flow graphs and that type of stuff. Is that now like standalone? You can just run an individual client and receive data, or is the process a little different?
The process is very similar. The ZMQ socket it's called a source in GNU radio flow graphs. It's the same as if you were using a source for a real radio. That part of the flow graph changes. It's one block, and then the rest of the flow graph is exactly the same. It doesn't matter whether it's a real piece of hardware or whether it's the ZMQ socket. So the process between the virtual world and the real world is very, very similar. Again, the only caveat is you can't retune the radio because it's not your radio.
Right.
And that is available. We give out those code snippets to allow people to just dump the data and then to build whatever they want on it. We've also added some examples, for instance, on how to dump it to a file. We didn't want to just distribute files because then it's a BitTorrent contest, right? Yeah. You download a bunch of files and you open them in the tool, and it just doesn't have that real feeling. But we do give those examples because some people are on bad connections or whatever. The goal, however, is to move all of this into the AWS environment so that you're not really streaming packets to your house. You're streaming packets from one location in a virtual environment to another, and it doesn't depend on your bandwidth at all to negate that packet loss on bad connections.
Yeah, I mean, our goal was always to teach, and we always were angry that we couldn't get the reach we really wanted. So by being able to send this out to the masses, and we typically leave this up throughout the year, at least parts of it throughout the year, and people are on our Discord and they're like, hey, can you run something? I want to do some testing. We now have the ability to have people do all the things that we do at conferences, all the things we teach at conferences, all the talks we give, and actually sit in their basements and do it, or sit in their offices and do it, or sit on their tablet in their car and do it. It's just, it brings it out to the masses. And one of our missions has always been to teach. RF Hacker Sanctuary, the actual mission of the 501c3 is to teach and to learn, to teach, learn, and pass on. So
the main thing that motivates us is we love doing this, and we'd like to find other people who love doing this and share what we love with them. And so the thing that really just thrilled me about last year, honestly, is we had a bunch of people in our Discord. It was like, I've never even dreamed that I'd be able to go to DefCon, and now I'm playing in a DefCon Capture the Flag. I'm so excited. It's like, me too, buddy. Me too. You know, you get to sit in your house in whatever country, and you get to do this, and you're excited, and I'm excited, and we're all excited together. And that's what we do this for. We just love this technology, and we love messing with it. And to share that with others is our goal.
That's awesome.
And we are missing that one last piece that is running right now, which is super exciting to me as well. We're actually doing another worldwide war drive. So working with Wiggle, that is happening again. Last year, from Monday to Sunday, we were over 1.1 million new APs found worldwide. We're shooting for a lot more than that, because by Tuesday, we started Monday night at midnight PDT. And by Tuesday afternoon, I think there were about 500,000 APs already found. So that's running simultaneously with all this as well.
Rick and Zero, describe for our audience what war driving is and some of the history behind it, because we've not talked about that on the show in several years.
And the tie between the
2005
worldwide war driving that technically no longer exists. Oh.
Rick's looking for his coin collection. Give him a second.
So That is what you're talking about, I think, Larry.
You got it.
Yeah. So, DefCon a million years ago, right after Shipley's talk, there was a push to have a worldwide war drive. And
Wait,
at
sorry,
the time,
Rick, for our audience as well. Shipley, I mean, I know what you're referencing in Shipley's talk, but it's a pretty historic talk in Wi-Fi security history.
Yeah, pretty much.
The significance.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So used to talking to you guys, in person at the village. And we all, yeah. Sorry about that. Not everybody knows who he is. We actually brought him back to the village a couple years ago. That was an interesting thing. So anyway, so that all started, and since it happened, I mean, it's what really rocked my world when it came to wireless and seeing what was really out there. We wanted to honor that tradition. The problem was we tried it at ShmooCon 5 years ago or so, and we had people going through DC, similar to the way that they did it in Vegas. The way they did it in Vegas was there were a bunch of access points. You had to grab as many as you could. There were some hidden access points that people had to find, and there was a bunch of rules that, frankly, it's been 19 years and I don't remember all of them. But essentially, it was go out and capture as many packets and as many access points as you can, and put them into some sort of tool, whether it was NetStumbler or Kismet or Aerodump, and turn them in for points. Well, we tried that at DefCon or at ShmooCon, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, and what we realized was everything that we would have done to cheat, people did, and trying to track that was really hard to do. So we had everybody turn in their packets by, I believe it was like 10 o'clock on Sunday, and Heidi's briefing was the end of ShmooCon was somewhere around 3. And I think it was 2:49 before we were able to parse through it. Rick wrote a billion scripts to try and make things work. So we decided that we'd shelve that for a little while. Well, last year with the pandemic, we wanted to propagate this and we wanted to push it out again, and we really wanted to bring it back to life. So we got in touch with the guys at Wiggle, and they're like, hell yeah, we'd love to do that. For those that don't know, Wiggle.net is the pretty much central repository for war driving, going out and gathering packets. They've built themselves out to cellular, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. So that's super cool. We were really just interested in Wi-Fi because Bluetooth moves, and cell towers, there's weird FCC stuff that we don't want to totally publish. So we did the Wi-Fi piece, and they captured so many packets. It was absolutely amazing. There's people out there that have walked 67 kilometers this week already. There's people on skateboards. There's people at DefCon that were in Salt Lake City that are, multiple zones trying to catch packets. The way that Wiggle designed it was they actually made everybody build out a quadrant. And within that quadrant, you had to capture as many access points as you could. But we wanted to make it a little bit more challenging. So within those access points, there were false foxes, or APs that had MAC addresses that people needed to find. It proved that they were actually in that quadrant. And
we don't give away the entire anti-cheating mechanism, Rick.
What?
Maybe don't give away the entire anti-cheating mechanism. Just a thought.
It's not all of it. There's more. God, you finish up then, smarty pants.
Yeah, so with the pandemic, we decided we wanted people to do this, and we didn't want to score it, and we couldn't even guess how we would make it fair. And we engaged with Wiggle, and they helped us come up with this really great idea of building these quadrants and trying to get the best coverage you possibly could inside of the area you select. A lot of people played last year, which was really exciting for us, but the scoring was crazy. One particular user really just ran away with it and did awesome. And the local celebrity of Grimace has been enduring through the year. And this year, a lot more people really played very tactically, trying to pick the best quadrant, because the way the scoring works is there's a certain number of points that Wiggle's seen, and they're in that quadrant already. Somebody's war driven that area before.
I was going to say, so there has to be a baseline, right?
Right.
So I have to find as many access points within that quadrant based on the baseline of what maybe thousands of people have found in the past.
Right, exactly. So Wiggle's been collecting this data for 20 years, and they've got a decent amount of stuff, and they take all of that, and they say, okay, we think there's 10,000 access points in this quadrant. And then they pick some of the ones that are the highest quality, and they use those as foxes. And basically, you have to find those to make sure that you are actually driving through your area.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get scored on what percentage of the access points in the area you find. So if you find all of the access points, that's great. But what these people are doing is they're finding these quadrants that have some data, or like a few neighborhoods were just built there. And now there's thousands and thousands more access points. So the current leaders are at 180 times the initial number of access points.
Right.
So they found 180 times more access points than Wiggle knew about.
Again, back to your comment, it's really difficult to score.
It is really difficult to win. It's not difficult to score. There's 60 players with a score.
Score accurately.
It's scoring, our scoring.
Yeah, our ability to score is really, really difficult. So we've intentionally designed it this way. We've intentionally put in a bunch of anti-cheating mechanisms. There's a bunch of reports on the back end that go through the data as it's reported, so that there's the regular Wiggle import process. And then there's a post-processing script that they run just for us that does extra discrimination to make sure that all of the stuff is legitimate looking.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not legitimate looking, we go over it together with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that nobody's cheating.
Because my goal would be to generate SSIDs and then discover them. And I'm sure that's probably one of the more common tactics.
That is exactly
driving
what the
around with a packet generator is exactly what we're stopping.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say, and to their credit, and just giving them their due, Wiggle is all about 100% about privacy and not allowing people's information out there.
Yep.
So people that are actually playing in the game sign a secondary checkbox that says, your data is going to be tracked based on your username.
Yep.
Otherwise, and that was a big change for them, they don't track based on SSIDs based on username as a open system. They actually try to anonymize that on their end as much as possible. So they've made some concessions for the game.
When I saw this last year, I thought that was quite amazing in that. So not only can you get points for the CTF, it helps keep their data fresh. Like, because on this one day, this couple of days, everybody's getting new data. Because I can remember for a long time with Wiggle data, like we'd go back to go and look stuff up there and like, hey, there's an access point and it's from like 2001, and all of a sudden that data started going away. Like some of that data started falling off, which is good, at least from being displayed to us, I'm sure. So getting
some
new
of those
data there is
access
amazing.
points you bought in 2001 only had so much life in them before they just melted and stopped working, basically.
And the landscape has changed in 20 years.
Big time.
Yep.
So what were the reasons back then you would war drive, and why would you want to war drive today, other than for just the lols?
Oh God, back then was war driving to find internet. That was like the main reason. I mean, war. I know that was a backhanded softball, but war chalking, where you would actually draw on the ground or near a building what type of Wi-Fi they had, what their encryption was, how strong their signal was, how much bandwidth they had.
Like the
just finding internet out,
like the hobo markings. Yeah, like the old school hobo markings.
Yeah.
Yep. So when you came off the train tracks, you knew that there was a friendly lady that would let you sleep in the shed and would give you some oatmeal for breakfast type of thing.
Yeah, you have chalk stains on your fingers still, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was done to try and find Wi-Fi. Back then, as a young hacker, trying to find networks that we were able to look at or to track or to figure out or to break, or when Cow Patty would come out and we'd have our 45 CDs that would have all the data on them. It was what was cool back then, and a lot of that's changed now. We're driving now is more for like reconnaissance and trying to figure out what's in an area or density or population, or how much is how many WPA3 access points can you find. I know at one point on Wiggle, I was the leader in WPA3 access points with 3, which were at my house.
Damn it, I'm going to be behind you with 1 at my house.
I think Zero's got us all now, but he's got his 65 radio rigs now.
True.
72, but who's counting?
There we go. Sorry.
There was always a great debate back in the day too, like how many access points were open, how many were WEP encrypted, and then how many were WPA. Is it really like the landscape just kind of changed? I would imagine you don't find too much WEP. You probably still find some open access points.
You'd be surprised.
With captures and stuff.
A surprising amount of WEP still. I don't think I've gone out on an engagement where we haven't seen it somewhere in the last year or two. The handheld scanners, the symbol scanners, and some of the POS systems don't have a WPA supplicant in them, and they're too expensive for a lot of groups to change. So in industrial parks and places like that, I'm still seeing a decent enough amount of WEP to make it still viable.
Medical equipment too.
Yep. Yeah, I wanted to say the irony is that I went to define my grid square for wireless CTF this morning. And my home area doesn't have enough access points, so it wouldn't let me use my home area as a grid square. Thanks, guys, because there's a ton of new stuff there. And then,
if you had been wiggling there to start with, then there would be more things, and you could use that grid square.
But why would I? So I wiggled the grid square on my way to the studio tonight. So I actually wardrobe on the way to the studio, and I seem to remember looking on the phone in the Wiggle app because I was lazy. And I want to say that Wiggle had documented like 35 million web networks still in their database.
Yeah.
That is the approximate number. It's 4.55% of what they've seen. The Wiggle stats page is great. They've got a public stats page. And if you look at the Wi-Fi networks over time section, you can see when our contest was last year.
Right.
It is the largest spike on the chart. And we're really hoping to top that this year.
I know Larry and I have always, talked about it as new wireless, technologies. I mean, at one point, Bluetooth was a newer wireless technology, right? And as newer ones come about, like, could you ward drive for those? Have you thought about expanding it to? I think Bluetooth listening is still really super interesting. Yep. I know Zero, you've done some of that.
I see one that would sort of the up and comer that might be kind of interesting to add for another one. One LoRa, like, could we do some sniffing on LoRa? And
what is LoRa?
It's long range radio technology, low speed, and Thread.
Yeah, Thread is definitely something people are looking for. We've talked a lot about Wiggle, and one of the great things about Wiggle is their sweet little Android app that does Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and cell towers because it's a cell phone.
Yep.
However, the majority of players are playing with Kismet. And Kismet does a whole bunch of stuff more than that. So you can do a few different kinds of software-defined radios, mostly based on RTL SDR. You can do ward driving for RTL 433 stuff, which is like all your car clickers and your TPMS sensors. It's and amazing. The little button that turns your outlet on and off for your Christmas tree lights.
And does Mike's still actively maintaining Kismet? He is still the person behind
Draghorn is still the one who leads.
Dude, he's done like an amazing job.
New core.
Yeah, like I remember when I first started converting my laptop and other systems to Linux, I'm like, well, this is great. Now I don't need a VM for any of this crap. And I had to do some Wi-Fi troubleshooting. And like he had packages already up with a repo for 2004. I'm like, this is awesome. And he had a whole new. I hadn't used Kismet in some time. He has a whole web interface now and stuff. Like it's really awesome.
Yeah, the amount of interfaces that it'll take. We did the last year that we were physically at DefCon. We actually got interviewed on the Ferris wheel with our Kismet mobile rig. 17 sources going into Kismet. It may or may not have been handcuffed to me on the Ferris wheel for shits and grins, but that's it was an interesting night. But we were able to get temperature sensors. We were able to pick up airplanes, a ton of Wi-Fi, a ton of Bluetooth. What else was mouse and keyboards that were heavily vulnerable up on the top of the Ferris wheel in Vegas.
Now, for the input, what is the keyboard using input into Kismet for that? What hardware? RTL SDR?
Bluetooth? Some of them.
No, those are mouse jack dongles.
Yeah.
They're a little NRF chip.
Okay.
The same ones used by a mouse jack and Logitech.
Okay, I didn't know Kismet would take that input.
Totally does. He's really like, if it's easy to capture packets with, Kismet supports it right now. There's maybe 5 or 6 different Bluetooth low energy chips that it supports. It supports several different Zigbee devices. It supports RTL SDR for anything that reasonably and rationally formats the data. He's rewritten his own ADSB and one that is for power sensors. He also does power meters. Yeah, you can track airplanes in Kismet. You can see if your neighbor's got the fridge turned on or whatever. I mean, it's got an amazing amount of things that just plug right into it. And there's new things being developed every day, which is awesome. There's some folks working on building Crocodile Hunter in as a source. However, that's a little bit more challenging.
What is Crocodile Hunter?
So Crocodile Hunter is the EFF's 5G, 4G kind of look for evil cell towers device. So it's
a catcher.
Yeah, it's an MZ catcher.
Yep. Okay.
It's based on I believe Blade RF and some other different software-defined radios, and it's an MZ catcher, and it's a really big involved piece of software because LTE is a pretty big involved piece of software itself. So that's a little bit more difficult. But things like
is that legal to run in the U.S.? I know some of the cell frequencies were protected. Is that?
I would like to refer you to the EFF.
Yeah.
The EFF released that software, and they're not
lawyers. They've got lawyers there, so yeah.
They do.
I think what Zero's trying to say is he's not a lawyer, nor did he play one on TV last night, and it's getting late, and he needs yogurt.
It's a smart answer.
Oh,
yogurt o'clock is actually 9, so we've got a few hours still.
All right.
Just to dinner.
Good. But so from the wireless CTF perspective, I know you guys are doing a ton of stuff. There's all sorts of SDR, demodulate, decode. There's a bunch of Wi-Fi stuff. Thoughts about adding some of these new technologies and how you could potentially even virtualize some of those to make them at home, like lower end thread.
So I'll start off with, we are a volunteer organization that loses other people's money for fun. And if you'd like to join us in losing other people's money, we are happy to help you. We buy hardware and we build cool challenges based on whatever skill set we have available to us, right? So I would love to add more stuff. We need people with those skill sets. So for example, LoRa is something I've never personally played with. Could we virtualize it? Sure.
Wait, so Zero, what do people use LoRa for? What are the applications of that? You said it was long range.
LoRa's a long range, low power protocol, and it's mostly used for like small sensors or small message passing interfaces.
Yep.
To just kind of send stuff.
Yep. Typically like MQTT. It's growing in popularity for some IoT type and IIoT stuff.
Oh, I see. Like a serial Modbus kind of protocol, but in
you think old days of 900 megahertz stuff.
Yeah. So the problem is like everything that uses LoRa's a base technology, but there's a bunch of really tweaky parameters. Like they're not all on the same frequency. They're not all on the same XYZ modulation. Like they can change a bunch of that stuff. So if there's a really popular thing that uses LoRa, we can easily, add something that picks that up. But that's just not something I've spent a lot of time with. So that's not something I can do. But what I can do is take somebody that has that expertise and help them to build a challenge, help them to build something virtual. The other thing is some of this stuff just doesn't easily lend itself to virtual, right?
Yeah.
One of our favorite challenges was the dog shock collar challenge, and it's just not the same virtual. So what we would do is have a shootout. We would have a shock collar from Home Depot or whatever.
Oh, so it's a collar, and then the remote is RF.
Yes,
and it sends the shock.
A dog shock collar, a training collar, and we'd have 2 people put them on, and then they would go back to their laptops and they would try to shock the other person before they got shocked.
Oh,
that's super fun.
It is,
but it's not fun virtual. Some things just don't lend
super
themselves
not fun if you're the person getting shocked. I bet though.
Well, the fun part about it was a one-way transmission, and you didn't know if you were sending it to you or you were sending it to the other collar.
So you could be shocking yourself.
And there were people that were shocking themselves quite a bit. It was awesome to watch.
It's an interesting take on Battleship.
Yeah, right?
You shoot my Battleship.
Incorporate that into Battleship. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game ended when somebody wrote a full decoder and encoder, and they actually knew what they were sending. Because what we would do beforehand is we'd press a random button, we'd let people capture it. We'd press another random button, let people capture it. And it's like, replay whichever one you want. Whoever gets shocked first loses. And they would just replay everything, and they'd shock themselves, and they'd shock the other player, and everyone would laugh, and it was fun. And somebody built a full decoder and encoder, and it's like, oh no, what was the limit on the remote? 100? No. The protocol goes up to 255. Let's see if this thing works.
And it does, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
Battery died first shock.
Oh yeah.
So depending on the signal it receives, that determines the strength of the shock. It's not a physical switch, right?
No.
Correct. It is dependent on the signal. And the remotes for like home use go from 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And the remotes for military use go up to 255. And the protocol the remote's different. That's it. The shock collar's the same.
Yep. The remote sends a different value in this field.
Yep.
Done.
Exactly.
Oh,
Ouch.
Yep.
There's a question from the chat. What about WeSun? I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
WISUN. Anyone?
Sounds like I got to pee, or my boy needs to go pee. WeSun. I don't know.
Yeah, but we've been pretty open on our Discord channel. I mean, if you have the ability to create a challenge, and within a few parameters that we can score, we'll take submissions, and we'll absolutely change, alter, modify it. You can't play that, and you're pretty much banned from that challenge. But we're taking submissions for challenges across the board. So if you have one for Laura, send it to us, and we'll get it in place as long as it meets our parameters.
Nice.
Yeah, I would like to say our Discord is probably the friendliest place on the internet I've ever been. People are there because they just love doing this stuff. And so whether it's somebody who's got tons of expertise or whether it's somebody that has no idea what they're doing, but they think this stuff is interesting, it's just super nurturing environment because people they like this and they want to share it with others. And there's none of that old IRC stuff.
Yeah, and that I was going to say back earlier that was very much like RF Hacker Sanctuary. The mission is to give back, just like the old school hackers that wanted to share their information with folks to help everybody be better.
To be fair, there was ones that did and some that didn't.
It's true. Admittedly,
and I think promoting and encouraging the ones that do, right, is important, right? Because I think it's important to share knowledge.
Yep.
Speaking of that, my next...
But real quick, and you say that the Discord channel is incredibly friendly. I would tend to agree, except for the Pen2 support channel. Like, the guy that runs that he's a dick.
Oh, God, such a dick.
Works on mine.
Yeah. That's just the automated bot. That's zero chaos.
That's zero.
Yeah, it works on my machine.
I have automated that response. Yeah. It works on my machine.
And
use Pen2.
Lee has a question.
So I'm thinking, with all the success it had, you've got to have people pounding down the door to come, have you help them at their event or provide an option event. What's that look like?
That looks like a constant stream of people sending us emails or talking to us on Discord saying, "Hey, would you like to, do a capture the flag at our conference?" And for hacker conferences, the answer is yes, as often as we can. We've probably done more CTFs this year than we have any previous year because we've retooled everything and we can get a much faster turnaround. We can play a game every weekend. And when there isn't a game to be played, I normally just turn it back on and let people play it, without a conference at all, just so that they've got the experience into play and I've got the test. They report bugs or complain that things are broken and then I get to fix them. So we really try to do it as much as possible. The one thing we do turn down is we don't do paid gigs. Like, we're not going to do your corporate event. We're not going to do those kinds of things. But for hacker conferences, for free conferences especially, we love to do, B-sides events and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So how do you pay your cloud bill? Right? Because you guys must have to pay to host these in the cloud, correct?
Yeah, our costs are non-zero. Yeah, we've got great sponsors for years.
Oh, okay. So you do have someone that helping you foot the bill, because I was going to say you're spinning up stuff in the cloud that obviously costs money most of the time.
Well, it was actually, it's funny, it was more expensive before the cloud, or differently expensive.
Yep.
We'd walk into a conference with, like Rick said, like 6 Pelican cases, 27 miles of Cat5, and 35, 40 access points. He started automating this about 6 years ago to a point where it was 5 or 6 access points, and now we have the ability to run live and virtual exactly the same. So if you're sitting at DefCon next year and we're sitting at the table at the RF Village, the game that people are playing on the floor is going to be the same game that somebody's playing in Europe.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So when
the sponsors do make that.
The sponsors how much skin do they have in the game? I mean, are they having to roll up their sleeves, or are you taking it all on for them?
Yeah, as I said before, we're really happy for anybody who wants to help us. We do have a fairly small team, and it does affect our ability to do new things because the team is the team, and they've got the skills that they've got, and more people are always welcome. The sponsors, majority sponsor us with money. We do have some sponsors that sponsor us with hardware that we give away to winners of the game and those kinds of things. Especially at conferences, people love to walk away with a new SDR, a new Wi-Fi card or whatever, and that's great. We have a few sponsors that have helped us through specific technical difficulties. For example, we wanted to do some 802.11ac stuff, and we want to do some 802.11ax stuff, and we engaged with our sponsor Aruba to help us with that. But they don't control the game. None of the sponsors get to control the game. We control the game. We choose what we do. It's the best hacker idea of how sponsorship works. You give us money and we decide what to do with it.
Yeah.
How big is your team?
We purposefully won't take a sponsor that wants to be too involved.
Right.
We do a lot of cool things for our sponsors. We throw up waterfalls of their images up on the screens, and we do some really cool stuff to promote them as much as we can. Aruba, like Rick said, I mean, we've got their stuff on our tables, using it pretty regularly, but for the most part, we ask them to support us, and we thank them really hardcore and a happy handshake. But beyond that, we're using their stuff and using their money to make this better for people.
Now, how big is your team?
So the total team is about 10 people. The total people who are hard engaged is probably closer to 5.
Compared to
again,
how
like
many
some
players?
people do their part, and they just do their part, and they reliably do their part, and I love those people forever.
Yeah.
Because there's too many things, and you need somebody to do it. So we've got a team member, Corey, who takes care of the majority of the SDR stuff. And I say, hey, I'd like it to be architected this way. And he says, you got it. And then he builds it, and then I don't have to worry about it. Our team member, Dan, does all of the POXAG stuff. And every time there's a conference, I say, please roll the keys. And he rolls the keys, and he gives me what I need, and we run the game. More people like that are great. You don't have to do everything, right? Nobody wants to be the web developer for the team. And so I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to, but it gets done. Somebody has to maintain the scoreboard code. Somebody has to maintain the stuff that nobody wants to deal with. And that's a core team member job. But volunteers do what they want to. And people that want to donate a challenge to us that's actually usable, the answer is, yeah, come be our friend. And I know a lot of villages do like a call for volunteers and things like that. And we found that the best way to get involved is just join our community, jump into Discord, talk to people. When I say something silly like, hey, I'm setting up the game. If anybody wants to help me test, that'd be great. And you start testing, you get noticed real quick. I mean, there's a few people in our Discord that have no technical association with us whatsoever, other than they like wireless stuff like we do. And I'll post, a Docker container that I'm using for the contest. And they'll say, oh, yeah, you messed this up right here. And they'll send me a pull request that installs the needed package that I missed or whatever. And it's like, that's spectacular. Like, this is open source. We've actually released almost 100% of our game. And in the next couple of weeks, it'll probably be 100%. One of the bits is really, really dirty, and I'm still cleaning it up. But we're actually releasing this. You can play this on your own. You can set this whole thing up. There's a series of scripts that just runs everything for you. And, we love people to be involved. So we try to make it as open and available as possible.
At the risk of running over on time, but I really want the answer, or at least some answers to this question, because I know it can go on for a while. If someone wants to get started in playing the CTF, in analyzing wireless frequencies, radio frequencies, what kind of hardware and software should they start playing around with?
So real fast, quick answer are we actually, unlike Pen 2, which is getting better, by the way, have some pretty decent documentation, and we keep it as updated as we can. joining the scoreboard creates a user account, and you have a button on there that says provision my VMs. You create those VMs, and it actually builds out your environment for you. So from a output of initial learning for this, 0. If you own a computer, have a tablet, even, I mean, if your eyes are still good and you're not wearing glasses yet, your phone, you can start to play this game. The Aerodump Wiki, the Gen 2 Wiki, the Arch Wiki, all these places that have information on how the radios work and how to use IW, how to use ifconfig, how to use, the different, minor tools that you need. You can get started with this pretty easily. Great Scott Gadgets, Mike Osman's talk, his 100 hours on how does SDR work, is an amazing place to start. If you're doing pure hardware, an RTL SDR is about $20. A Wi-Fi radio external, ACM, for example, is about $45. And a laptop is, if you have one that's old, it's, free, or you buy something cheap. Open source software is free. So we're at about $70 right there for really getting started in listening to these signals. When you want to start injecting, the SDRs get a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't take much to get started, and the built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in a lot of these newer laptops is phenomenal. So, low bar to entry.
Unlike back in the day.
Yep.
That's awesome. More questions?
I think we're all ready to start clicking. I mean,
they want to play.
That's exactly what we wanted. It's exactly what we want. We want a low barrier to entry. We finally found a way you can hack Wi-Fi from a Mac. Now you just have to use a browser.
But I want to hack somebody else's Wi-Fi from a Mac, Rick.
It's my Wi-Fi. Doesn't that count?
I guess.
Can you do it with Can you do it with VMs? I know that there was always the debate if it would actually recognize the hardware or the virtualization layer would get in the way.
Can you
talking about Macs or just VMs in general?
Both.
So Macs still have to recognize the radio to pass it through the hardware abstraction layer to get it into the VM.
So USB.
Docker seems to be working very well, though.
Interesting.
Yeah, but not on a Mac. You have to be on Linux to do that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
The answer is it works 80% of the time. And if it doesn't work, it will probably be so confusing you won't know. And that's really the big problem, especially with SDR. So with Wi-Fi,
I think you just described open source in general, basically.
But the problem is a lot of stuff you can tell if it's working or not. So if you pass your Wi-Fi card to the VM and it shows up, it's working, right? You assume everything's good, everything's cool, and 20% of the time it won't pass to the VM. And a small percentage of the time, it'll be stuck in like some weird state, and that's confusing. But that's a very small percentage of the time. With software-defined radio, it's different because the amount of bandwidth it needs and the amount of latency that it requires. Doing that VM abstraction layer and getting passed all the way in, sometimes it's just broken enough that nothing works. And not being an expert, it's super hard to diagnose that.
Yeah.
So this is why Pen 2 exists. This is why it's a live bootable Linux system. There's a bunch of competitors to Pen 2. If you don't want to use a Gen 2 based system, don't do it. You'll come back to me later when you learn. It's fine. But there's Kali.
We should point out for the audience that you are the creator and one of the main maintainers of Pen 2.
Yes, I am the maintainer. I did not initially start the project, but I joined soon after. And it is the longest running penetration testing Linux distribution. It started before Backtrack started, and it is still around after Backtrack is gone.
And it's basically a Gen 2, right? A Gen 2 based penetration testing Linux distro.
It is a Gen 2 based penetration testing distro. And what I tell people about that is if you're running a live CD, it only matters that the tools work. It doesn't matter what the base is so much.
Yeah.
If everything on there works the way you want it to and you're running live, great. So for a CTF environment, I want to run this at a con environment, there's no additional cost. This isn't extra effort to run Gen 2. If you like it and you install it, you're going to learn Gen 2 and there's a learning curve there and you're not going to love that. But if you've already gotten to, like the tools and the way things work, you use it. And if you don't want to, then don't.
But I think that's good. I mean, that's general advice in Linux that I give most people, regardless if we're talking about Pen2 or whatever. Like there's only so many hours in the day, and you got to pick what interests you. Like sometimes you have weird problems on Linux. Like, do I want to just go get a different piece of hardware and maybe troubleshoot something different and maybe not have the problem? Or am I like really interested in how this particular USB audio device works and I want to go pick it apart, right? And understand pulse audio and ALSA, which I don't recommend, by the way.
I've been a Gen 2 developer for 10 years, working on Pen 2 for the same amount of time. And my advice to anybody picking a Linux distro is use the one that you have to ask the least stupid questions about.
Yeah.
You know, if you're most comfortable in Ubuntu, use Ubuntu. And if you find that you're spending more of your time asking, like, I can't get this installed, why doesn't this work? Maybe it's time to look into something else. Something that works better for what your needs are, something that works for what you're trying to do.
It's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, too.
Totally.
That's because new people come in the field and ask me, like, oh, I want to learn all these Linux distributions. I'm like, look, try them all. But, like, eventually, like, pick one so that, like, you know what you're getting into and you know the commands and where the bodies are buried for the most part. So that you can troubleshoot more easily rather than going, well, I want to be an expert in 3 or 4. And then all the distros are just different. Like that's why it never has been the year of the Linux desktop, in my opinion, is because all the distros treat everything so differently.
And Red Hat is never the answer.
What I will do is, without patting Rick on the back with him listening, he does have one of the only distros that you can plug just about any radio into and it will work, because he does that much research on them. And luckily, I've got a group of people that we test with 5-6 times a year that send him 500 or 600 bug reports a year on different radios that have problems or issues or whatever, and they're fixed within hours. So it's pretty cool from that perspective. He is a little snarky online, but when it comes to an actual problem, it gets fixed real fast.
So he's snarky in person too. What are you talking about?
and so what you're saying is that Zero doesn't have a life.
Correct.
Okay.
And we give it right back to him.
Yep. Just like those lemons.
I think we should play 5 questions with both Ricks.
Yeah.
You guys ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure.
In a few years since I've had to play this game, sure.
Yeah, the questions have changed slightly. How we play the game hasn't, so I'm going to pick someone at random. Zero, you're going to go first. I'm going to ask you the question, and then Rick, I'm going to ask you the question, and then Rick, you're going to get the second question, and you'll figure it out. You're both really smart people. So, Zero, 3 words to describe yourself.
Cantankerous, tired, and honestly, loser. I lost the game this year. I'm very sad.
Rick, 3 words to describe yourself.
Dad, tired, and introvertedly extroverted.
Rick, if you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Oh, an axe, absolutely.
Zero.
Oh, you just said that to mess with Woody.
Absolutely.
Zero, what's your weapon of choice if you were a serial killer?
Oh, my hands.
Zero, if you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Adventures in Never Leaving the House.
Rick, if you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
1333 1337 reasons to do things wrong.
Rick, what's your favorite hacker movie?
Which Rick?
Rick M. Sorry.
Sneakers.
Zero. Favorite hacker
Can
movie?
I take his?
Yep.
You can, yes.
Totally Sneakers.
Oh, man. Jeff isn't here to razz me, but Jeff and I have like a little thing anyway.
I know you have a little thing.
I think, yes. It's a dongle. So, Zero, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Fictional or otherwise.
Oh, God. Pass.
And if Mega Man doesn't enter into it, I'd be disappointed.
Oh, man, that's a great idea. Yeah, Dr. Light and I guess it would be weird, but can it be Dr. Light and Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And it's 2021. I think that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. We said two parents. We didn't specify,
Yeah.
they could be of any gender, of any fiction, nonfiction. It's Rick M. Two celebrities.
Cal Ripken and Princess Leia.
There you go.
Oh.
Rick and
Wow.
Rick, thank you so much for appearing on this edition of Paul Security Weekly.
Thanks for having us.
Guys.
It's great.
Great.
Stay tuned. Coming up next, Scott and Yuri from Eclipsium. Stick around.